Good evening, everyone. My name's Councillor Healy, and I'm the Vice Chair in the chair for this committee tonight. I'd like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee, taking place at 5:30 p.m. Well, it's actually a bit after, on the 27th of January. So we'll just do a roll call first of all. Councillor S. Bagent? Yeah. Councillor Copley? Councillor Hawke? Councillor Payne? Councillor Porrer? Councillor Shield? Councillor, I don't think Sweeney's, no, Councillor Aston, and Councillor Gilderdale. Fantastic. Oh, sorry, I was thinking, sorry, Councillor Sweeney, yes, as well. Yeah, fantastic. So apologies were received from Councillor S. Davies and Councillor Paige Croft. We're also joined tonight by the Executive Councillor for Climate Change, Environment and City Centre, the Executive Councillor for Communities, and the Executive Councillor for Open Spaces, Sustainable Food and Community Wellbeing. So on each agenda item and after hearing the deliberation of the Scrutiny Committee, it's the responsibility of the Executive Councillor to make the formal decision. The officers permanently present for this meeting are the Director of Neighbourhoods and Communities, Jane Wilson, the Committee Manager, James Goddard, and Producer, Gary Clift. Other officers and public speakers will join us throughout the course of the meeting, and I'll introduce them at the start of the relevant agenda items. So a few bits of housekeeping. Copies of the agenda can be found on the City Council's website under Committee Meetings, Minutes and Agendas. Please try and refer to the specific page numbers within the agenda if you're referring to a specific paragraph or plan. Can I remind all of those present of the importance of using the microphones at all times when speaking? Please speak close to and clearly into the microphone. Please ensure that you've switched off or silenced any other devices so that you do not have them interrupt proceedings. And when you're invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone is switched on. And when you finish addressing the meeting, please turn off your microphone immediately. Speak slowly and clearly, and please don't talk over or interrupt anyone. And if anyone has any problems hearing me throughout the meeting, please alert me by waving your hands or advising a council officer. Please can those present in the council chamber note that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, is likely to be broadcast at some point. The camera follows the microphone being switched on, so councillors and officers are requested to wait a couple of seconds before speaking to allow the camera to catch up. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Those participating in the meeting via the live stream, indicate that you wish to speak via the chat column or raised hand option. Please do not use the chat column for any other purpose. The meeting chat is neither confidential nor private and can be subject to an FOI or DPA request. Make sure that your device is fully charged and that you switch your microphone off unless you're invited to speak. Please use a headset if available when speaking, and hold the microphone close to your mouth. Could public speakers turn their cameras off until we come to the item you've registered to speak about? If a report officer drops out from the committee due to poor broadband signal, the senior officer present in the room will take over their presentation report and respond to questions. The process for each agenda item will be: first, the relevant officer will give a brief introduction to the report. Then the Scrutiny Committee will discuss the item and may ask questions of the officer and/or the Executive Councillor for clarification. At the end of the deliberation, I'll ask the committee to vote by a show of hands on the officer's recommendation. In the event of a tied vote, I'll have cast and vote as chair. At this stage, the Executive Councillor will be asked to make her decision. If the view of the Executive Councillor differs from the view of the Scrutiny Committee, the decision will be deferred to the Leader of the Council. Only those present in the chamber can vote or propose or second recommendations. For the comfort of councillors, officers and the public, I may choose to call short breaks during the proceedings. If councillors or officers require a break at any point, please indicate to me and I'll halt proceedings at the next convenient opportunity. Okay, that's all the housekeeping done. Moving on to agenda item 2. Please could councillors declare if they have any declarations of interest and also identify which application their declaration relates to. I'll just declare a declaration myself for item 8. So that's a review of use of Regulatory or Investigatory Powers Act. So I am employed by Amnesty International, which has obviously been heavily vocal on this issue. So moving on to agenda item 3. Minutes of the 7th of October 2021 meeting have been submitted to this meeting for approval. If there are any concerns, please could members raise them now, otherwise they shall be approved as a correct record. Councillor Parra.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note that I think the written answers haven't yet been provided to Pesticide Free Cambridge and possibly the market traders. So I just wondered if you'd mind following up on that, as the last minutes say that they would be provided with written answers. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, it's just a minor clarification, bottom of page 5. That should be former chair of Abbey People. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to agenda item 4. There are no public speakers in this section of the community's portfolio, but there are in agenda item 6, which is the general public questions. So we now move on to agenda item 5, which is the Community Grants 2022-23. The presenting officer is Jackie Hansen, Community Funding and Development Manager, supported by Debbie Kay, who's Head of Community Services. There are no public speakers. So please could Jackie Hansen introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report that comes to this committee each year for the community grants for 2022-23, and the primary focus of this report is to look at the applications received and recommendations for awards that's detailed in Appendix 1. The report also provides updates about key areas of work, and particularly on this occasion has another recommendation on 2.2 to approve award to the Cambridge Council for Voluntary Service for a bid that is detailed later on in the report. Just to cover that generally, section 3 has got background around all of the funds that are available, the major funds that the team manages, and particularly with this report focusing on the community grants, outlines the priorities and outcomes that the fund seeks to achieve, with 3.5, the budget, available for the grants is £1 million, 70,000 of which goes to area committee. The rest of the section 3 really details the process that we've undertaken to be able to put together the recommendations detailed in the appendix. If I could just draw your attention to 3.12, because that is generally highlighting why we make decisions not to recommend to fund a particular project, which generally speaking is because it doesn't sufficiently target need, meet the scheme's priorities or outcomes, or that it just is the remit of another authority. If the recommended awards are approved, the budget will be spent in full. 3.14 gives you a bit more information about the area committee grant split, which is done by a population and poverty formula, and the amounts of money there. And you're probably aware that that's currently out for applications, and along with the Platinum Jubilee, where we've offered up to £500 for neighbourhood events, and we've had over 15 in at the moment, so that looks to be a positive fund that we're promoting there. Section 4 gives you a bit of background on what we've been doing in 21-22, and more information around the proposed 30,000 grant for Cambridge CCVS to build on the COVID recovery work that has already started in communities and align with our Cambridge Transformation Programme, investing in communities around community well-being. And again, section 4.2 and 4.3 really just explains a little bit about the flexible funder work, trying to support and be responsive to changing situations that the sector has faced for a couple of years now, and the general support that we continue to give groups to develop their governance policies and partnership work. Section 5 is highlighting a couple of projects that are moving into the grants team management, which is one, transferring the anti-poverty responsive budget from corporate strategy, and there will be a budget bid going in for one-off funding for 22-23 for 30,000 to respond to emergent needs. So that's not an external fund that's published, but it is one for us to be able to approach the sector who may be best placed to help in an emergency situation. Section 7 then details that we've also taken on the responsibility from planning for the community rights. So that's community right to bid, community right to challenge. And Section 6 just highlights that obviously when we're looking at the transformation project, as that develops, we want to make sure that the grants will align to future priorities and outcomes. I know it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the main report, but obviously happy to take questions, and the detail of the recommendations for the grants are in Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. So we'll now move on to the debate, and I'll remind members if they'd like to speak to indicate they wish to do so by raising their hand, and I'll introduce you when it's your time to speak. Councillor Payne.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Jackie, for a detailed report and for bringing this forward. I know from sitting on this committee for a few years how very hard you work with all the community groups to make sure they can be as successful as possible, and it's wonderful after such a challenging 2 years, I think, to see so many voluntary groups coming forward. So thank you to you and obviously all the volunteer organisations who've come forward as well. I've just got 3 quick questions, Chair. Should I just give them all 3 together, or would you like to take them one at a time?
Yeah, I think we'll go for them together.
Sure. So my first question was just a short one. I think in previous years, what's been quite helpful is that we've often seen indicated within the list, within Appendix 1, so within the list of grants allocated, which ones are new grants and which ones are recurring grants, where perhaps that group's applied in previous years. I was just wondering whether you're able to give any indication, Jackie, of how many of these are new organisations coming forward and how many are repeated groups who are coming back again for a second time to continue their work. My second question was around the evaluation at the end of the year for which the grant is allocated. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about the process by which it's evaluated whether these grants have been successful in helping the group meet their aims, and whether there's any capacity for the groups to work together to share good practice and what's made a successful bid and a successful venture. And then my third question is, obviously it's been a really difficult year, and I know you've talked already about how some groups have had to change slightly what they've done to fit with the sort of post-COVID environment. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about the planning in place or the sort of contingency plans for if COVID does affect some of these groups delivering their aims this year, if we have another lockdown, which obviously hopefully we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take those in order, and I was drastically trying to count up the groups that I thought were new. In the 21-22 column, wherever possible, we have tried to make an indication of new, and sometimes it's new groups or sometimes it's new projects that those groups have undertaken. But having a quick flick through, it really looks like there's approximately 10 new groups or projects for this year, which obviously gives you a clear indication that the majority of these groups do come back year on year for funding for similar projects. Some are programs which might have tweaks in what they're delivering in them, but some of them are the sustained activity for the organisations, particularly the larger grants where you get the services delivered by CAB, Centre 33. They're often very similar to previous years, offering very valued services to specific communities. So yeah, it is very much a fund at the moment where groups come back year on year. With regards to the evaluation process, it is one that is a considerable challenge to us in a way that this is an outcomes focused fund, and it is very difficult for us to present outcomes in any sort of statistical form to report back on. The reason being really is that each group will specify the outcomes that their project's going to meet, that then will contribute to our overall outcome of reducing poverty and inequality. So we do try and capture and have over previous years done a report where you've got case studies and anecdotal and quotes coming back to try and evidence and share the outcomes. And we've also done films previously and had events where we've had groups come and present for councillors, and we were talking about this in the team as to what that would look like for this year, because we want to run a type of event. What the team is very privileged to do is to assess all the monitoring forms that come back for each project, and that clearly indicates whether or not they have met the outcomes that they'd stated in their application for which we'd given the funding for the activity. Again, we know that's happened. We can see the value of that, and it is a challenge to pass that on. But what I can say is it is done with a thorough and consistent approach, and we follow up anything that is not satisfactory, and we rarely get an issue with any of our monitoring that the purpose for the grant has not, the activity has not taken place, or that the outcomes have not been achieved. So the actual success of the fund is really high. It's just a challenge in presenting that in any format. We can tell you numbers type stats, but not the actual outcomes. But definitely we get to see that. I'm very privileged to do so. And we will not change. We adopted a COVID-friendly funder statement in March 2020, and we will continue with that through this year. We hope that things may be more settled and that groups will be able to deliver the activities in the way that they've applied to and that we will award for, but they know, and it will be in their grant agreements, that they just have to contact us if they've got any difficulties or wish to do something different or something else has emerged. We will have those conversations as we've done for the last 2 years, and we'll adapt and review and support the groups in any way we can to ensure that some activity can benefit the people that we're trying to support. And there is no pressure for them to have to spend the money if it really becomes impossible. So we keep that fluid, and the team will work with all of these groups that get awards throughout the year. I hope I've covered everything there.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a few questions myself now. So first of all, thank you so much. I think this is a really ambitious programme of grants. You know, we're very lucky. A lot of other authorities don't have these sort of dedicated grants for the local community and voluntary sector. And I think this will go a really long way towards tackling poverty and inequality in our city. We are the UK's most unequal city, and I think it's really important that we are dedicating these funds. And I know that we have really tried to be fair and to give funding to a lot of different causes in different areas across the city, which is really important. And I just wanted to, on behalf of the committee, thank Jackie for all her hard work. And, you know, we know this is a huge amount of work and a fantastic piece of work, so thank you very much. My question's in relation to Gypsy Roma traveller communities, and we've obviously as a council committed to supporting these communities, and we've acknowledged the inequality that they do experience. So my question would be, have you received any applications from GRT communities or groups to support them in the grant round, and have any been rejected? And the second question is around the funding formulas. So obviously I can see that we have allocated different grant amounts to different area committees, and I wonder how is that determined? Is that based on socioeconomic deprivation, or how have the amounts been determined? Does anyone else have any further questions before? Councillor Aston.
Yes, I just want to put on record that thanks from Cherryington Residents Association for all the hard work that people don't see that Jackie has put in behind the scenes. We're still not there with our hub yet, but Jackie knows she's welcome to come and have our first coffee and cake with us. But Jackie has been the person who's breathed life into us when we've sometimes found ourselves thinking, will this ever happen? It's been going on a number of years, but hopefully we'll be putting the bricks down this year. So I just want to put on record the thanks from Cherryington Residents Association, the Benefit Society, for all the hard work that Jackie does behind the scenes. And as Tina Turner once said, simply the best.
Oh, thank you very much for your kind words, and it's really, really very nice of you. And I do have to pass on, obviously, some of this to the team because they really work hard in the background, and it's because we care about the community and the groups that we support. So thank you very much. Moving to your questions, Chair. With regards to Gypsy Roman Traveller, we don't have any specific applications this year coming in for voluntary groups to support that community. We have more infrastructure type activity that support in a more generic way, like the Cambridge Community Ethnic Forum. So we've had a conversation with this, and we're starting conversations with the Equalities Officer about looking at where these groups exist and could tap into these grants and promote it with them next year. But also it might be more the neighbourhood type activity that and the area committees that they wish to apply for something. So no applications this year, so none were rejected, but I think there is work for us to do to try and find these community groups that are out there that have not approached us at this point in time, so I will pick that one up. And with regard the area committee formula, it is historic. It's been around for many, many years. And what we do is we plot the population for each ward and then the ward benefit population for each ward. That is, you're going to like this one, that is weighted ×2, so that we are reflecting poverty, and then that is worked as a percentage for each of the areas. Then the pot of money is divided by that percentage, and it has been like that for at least 10 years. That's the calculation. I'm happy to send the breakdown round to all councillors, and could attach it as an appendix to the area committee reports, which will be going to the next cycle in February and March, so that all councillors can see how that calculation has come about for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further debate? Oh, yeah. Councillor Copley?
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a small question both to Jackie and also to the Executive Councillor, which was about the area committee grants having a total of 70,000, and understand it's been the same amount for a very long period of time, but with inflation that will mean a real money decrease. So my question is to the Executive Councillor: would they in future commit to this rising with inflation, which would be particularly important when inflation is very high, so that there is the same real amount of money available for groups to apply for?
Let's take the question from Councillor Power before we have the answers. Thanks.
Excuse me, losing my glasses there. Thank you, Chair. Quick question about the allocation. Okay.
Sorry, it doesn't seem to be working.
We'll swap the microphones if that's okay, but we just need to reallocate so your name appears, Councillor.
I'm just going to see it. That one's working. Brilliant. Sorry. So first question was just whether the boundaries have been adjusted in the light of obviously the boundary changes we had at the elections last year, because obviously that has shifted various populations into different wards. Secondly, paragraph 310 is talking about discretionary rate relief, which I understand obviously is not in our control, but I just wondered how much of a risk that might be, you know, because I'm assuming we're okay for the next year, but I'm guessing that we may become more vulnerable to losing money from that route later. And finally, just picking up on the points you made earlier, Obviously, there are some groups who've applied who would have protected characteristics. So, we've got the Kite Trust, we've got Black and Asian Women's Support Network, Red Hen, who haven't got awards or have smaller awards than they asked for. So I just wanted to clarify that we are obviously going back to those groups to make sure, in particular those in our protected characteristic groups, are getting support and advice on maybe how to do this next year, which I'm sure you are, but it would just be nice to confirm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to start with those, and then if the Executive Councillor wants to add anything? I was just going to start with the question from Councillor Copley regarding inflation, and generally speaking, the grants budget has remained £1 million for many years, and the allocation from that million used to be 60,000 to area committee, and 10,000 used to go in from Safer Communities. When the Safer Communities Fund was diverted to a different way of supporting projects, the community grants increased that to keep the 70,000. So yes, the 70,000 has still remained static, but an additional 10,000 has gone in from community grants over the years. The whole of the budget remains without inflation at this point in time. So I will, obviously, if the Executive Council wants to comment on your request, it would mean that there would be less in the main budget as well if the Area Committee one was increased. Councillor Porras' questions with regards to the boundaries, yes, we have taken on board the changes to that in the calculations. Discretionary rate relief is only really awarded through the community grants, and the groups that apply still have to meet our priority outcomes, and the funding to support that discretionary rate relief still has to come from the grants budget. The good part of making a discretionary rate relief award for a group is that it doesn't cost us the amount that it would cost the group themselves to pay. The reimbursement that comes out of our pot to be able to pay and support that is 40% of the cost, so it's good value from the grant to be able to support the activity that meets our priorities. And you'll see that in the report that we've got a mix of people that get a main grant, and so it's an additional amount of money to support their activity because they won't have to pay the 20% rate top up, and some are just for discretionary rate relief only, and we have then assessed that their activity that they do from that building, from their organisation, supports the fund. And the third one around where groups get smaller awards, the majority of the time what we're looking to do is assess each application and on its merit, and in response to what they have been awarded last year as to whether it might destabilise them if it was significantly less, but also that the costs that they're put into building the budget and their request are realistic, and often we can find that there can be some unreasonable overheads, because we do accept overheads, or high cost for hourly rates for workers, or other elements of a project that, so for example, not just say recipes and healthy eating plans, but they might want to do some more printed material, and some of them we don't want to fund all of the activity, but with each one, and I appreciate the ones that you've highlighted, we do have conversations with them, we invite them to workshops, we also engage with the CCVS and the Cambridge Ethnic Community Forum to support those groups as well, and encourage those conversations, and with our work with them through the year to ensure they put in the best and realistic bid that they can, and that we can support a diverse range of activities. I think the Kite Trust have, although not what they wanted, but have had the same award this year as previous years, and the Cambridge Ethnic Community Forum have as well, and I can't remember the last group. So, but definitely we will continue to work with them, because we do know as well that some of our ethnic minority groups do find form filling in and the process a challenge, so we do keep working with them to make it as easy as we possibly can. Thank you.
Did the executive councillor want to come in now?
Just doing that balancing between glasses and mask that is so much a part of modern life. Councillor Copley, thank you for your answer, for your question rather. I think what I would want to emphasise is partly to back up what Jackie was saying, that the area committee grant as part of this is part of the much larger grant fund. So one of the things we would need to do would then be looking at the balance between the two parts of that. More broadly though, we are, as far as I know, one of the very few district councils in the country to have maintained such a large grant pot in the face of, as you're aware, very significant budgetary pressure. Many districts I'm aware of have either reduced or cut their grant pots entirely. I would absolutely love to be able to say that we were going to double the entire community grants pot. I would love that. We are not in that financial situation right now, and so we have to look at our overall budgetary picture. And I think I'm right that across the whole range of grants that are given to the community, and not just the ones that are labelled community grants, but going more broadly, I think it's 1.7 million that the council gives out a year, which is really quite astonishing actually for a district. So we need to be able to see that in the context of the other things. If we were looking at increasing the amount, say, for area committee grants, we would have to look at how that balanced across everything else. I'm trying to remember, and I'm pretty sure, and Jackie will probably nod at me or not here, that we have on occasion shuffled between pots mid-year where that's been needed, because it's all part of the same overall grant pot. Good, she's nodding. I got that right. The other thing I wanted to say while I had the floor, as it were, is that this is a really sad meeting because this is Jackie's last meeting with us. As many people know, she is retiring, and this will be the last committee that she reports to. And for all of us who have worked with Jackie, it will be really hard to imagine doing this next year without her. And I know how much work she puts into this, and I think they are the longest meetings I ever go to during the year when Jackie and I sit down and go through her spreadsheet and kind of pore over every single line on that. And every question I ask, she has an answer to. She can give me 6 paragraphs more information than's on the report on it. She knows it inside out. She cares so deeply about every group that we work with and making sure they all get the very best from the council and that they get allocations in a really fair and absolutely objective way. And we are going to miss her so much and all the work she does. So Jackie, thank you so much for what you're doing. And we wish you all the very best. And yes, I saw someone about to clap there, and I feel that would be what we should do. So a real clap for you, Jackie.
Thank you very much. And I think you've really sold it for the new executive councillor to want to spend that time in meetings with us.
Thank you. Just before we move on to the vote, any further debate? Nope. Yep. Okay. So, so please, can the officer read out the recommendation so we can be clear on what's being voted on?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so recommendation 2.1, approve the community grants to voluntary and community organisations for 2022-23 as set out in Appendix 1 of this report, subject to the budget approval in February 2020 and any further satisfactory information required of applicant organisations. And recommendation 2.2, approve 30,000 to the Cambridge Council for voluntary sector for building community power and resilience project, following on from the remarkable support undertaken by communities during the pandemic and linking to the council's Our Cambridge Transformation Programme as detailed in section 4. Thank you.
So moving to the vote, can I ask with a show of hands, all councillors in favour of approving the recommendations?
Unanimous, Chair.
Fantastic. So can I ask the executive councillor if she approves the recommendations?
Delighted to approve them, and thank you to the committee for your unanimous vote on that.
Okay, so moving on to agenda item 6. Please could public speakers state if they wish to speak now or when we come to the agenda item they're interested in, and public speakers will have 3 minutes to speak with an additional 2 minutes for follow-up questions. The committee manager will advise you when you reach 3 minutes. And after addressing the committee, public speakers are welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting, but don't have to. Public speakers are not entitled to address the committee at any other point in the meeting, and should a member of the public try to speak at a point when they're not permitted to, they'll be asked to stop by the chair. If the member of the public continues to speak, they'll be asked to leave the meeting. In the event that a meeting is disrupted to the extent that usual business cannot be conducted, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period of time. Okay, so to the public speakers. First of all, we have Alice Barnes. And would you like to go ahead, Alice? Is Alice not here, no?
I was just conferring my colleague, Chair. I believe Alice Barnes isn't here. I have the question and answer that I will read out, if that's okay.
Fantastic.
Question: what are the council's plans to improve access to drinking fountains across the city? The stark lack of public drinking fountains in Cambridge has always seemed to me to be completely at odds with our ambition to be a green city. The refill programme is no substitute for drinking fountains. Moreover, in the current pandemic, the last thing we want is extra people crowding into shops and cafes just to fill up water bottles. We are a very active city with cyclists and runners everywhere, something we can be proud of. Can we please cater to them a little better and to the many tourists we welcome to the city by having simple water fountains in select locations? The officer response to that, Chair, was introduction of water fountains in Cambridge was added to the Spring 2020 Environmental Improvement Plan. This initiative followed on from a successful trial water filling station located on Parker's Piece in 2019. The EIP project, the Environmental Improvement Plan, sought to locate public water points on some of the key open spaces in the city and were operational upon COVID-19 pandemic restrictions easing in July 2021 to avoid the potential transmission given the push button operation. Currently, we have water points for drinking at Parker's Piece, Cherry Hinton Hall, Jesus Green, Lammers Land, King's Hedges, Recreation Ground, Christ Pieces, and imminently on Midsummer Common. There is also a fountain located within the Lion Yard public conveniences. We also have a pre-approved project for a pump-out station for Moorers at Stourbridge Common, which will enable provision on this site as part. Seems to be a breached sentence there. We continue to explore further opportunities on our sites and across the city centre street scene and welcome public suggestions could be explored and where practical delivered as part of an ongoing programme to run alongside the refill and other green initiatives. Statement ends, Chair.
Thank you. Does the Executive Councillor want to add anything further? No? No, fantastic. Okay, so let's move on to the next question from Anne Rivington on herbicide. Now, the public speaker has the option of we do the question now or they can wait until this item comes up because it's also on the agenda later. So it's up to yourself. Anne, if you'd like to indicate when you'd like to speak.
I'd like to speak at the agenda item, point 7, pesticide reduction.
Great, that's great. We also have another question on the same agenda item. We have a written question, so I think we'll just take them all together. I think at the item, I think that's probably the best way to do it. Okay, so moving on now to agenda item 7, which is the herbicide reduction plan. So the presenting officer is Alistair Wilson, who's Streets and Open Spaces Development Manager. And we're also joined by the public speakers that we've just heard. So we'll take the public question first. Yep, we'll take the public question first. So Anne, could you now come in and give your question, please?
Hello. Chair, before we start, I'd like to ask if members can see the sheet with the amendments to Appendix A, G and H that I'm requesting, either on the screen or on hard copy sheets.
So all members have a copy of it?
They do?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I welcome the recommendations made in the herbicide reduction plan. However, please could you accept some amendments at 2.1a, where the herbicide reduction plan project is set out in Appendix A. My reasons for suggesting the amendments to G and H are: dates and preparations for the 12 wards outside the herbicide-free trial are not mentioned in the HRP. The start date for herbicide spraying is not given, nor the need for website content updating or publicity for these treatments. The date for consultation and communication preparations for the trial wards to be ready is the 25th of February, with a start date of the 1st of March. See point 5 of the report. Resources need to be allocated so residents can look up planned herbicide treatment dates by road and ward on the council's website and see in situ signage so they can keep pets, children, the vulnerable and themselves away from treated areas. Herbicides are probably carcinogenic, as stated by the WHO, and they are neurotoxic to humans. After treatments, herbicide treatment, plants do not die off for 5 to 10 days, so herbicides are invisible for that time. Glyphosate, the most common herbicide, has a half-life of 3 days to 19 weeks, depending on the weather, so it can stay toxic for a long time. For these reasons, please could you accept my amendments at Appendix A, which are, in summary, at G, communicate with residents about any herbicide applications, which will include publishing the planned dates of herbicide treatments by road and ward for the whole city for the remainder of 2022 on the council website, allowing residents to find out when a treatment is planned. And after 2022, herbicide treatments will end. And at H, commit to displaying signage in situ on relevant roads and pavements with dates of any herbicide treatments for the remainder of 2022, after which herbicide treatments will end. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the officer and the executive councillor both to respond on your proposed amendment. Does the officer want to go first? Or
Chair, I think I'm going to go first.
okay, fantastic. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Anne, for your question and also for your commitment, which I know has been a long-standing commitment to herbicide reduction, particularly around communicating the benefits of herbicide-free streets and spaces to other Cambridge residents. Thank you also for your suggested amendments and the detailed information surrounding them. Firstly, items G and H are part of the motion agreed at full council in July. So at this stage, we can't amend them formally without taking the motion back to a future full council meeting. At this stage, I don't think we really want to delay any further. We're about to enter the growing season, which is the time for us to start collecting data on the effectiveness of the planned trial. That doesn't mean, though, that we're discounting what you've outlined in the proposed amendments. And I'm going to, if I may, address your reasons behind the proposed amendments point by point. So point one, the project initiation document isn't at this stage intended to be at the level of determining specific dates. That detail's still to be determined once we know where those streets will be, who's going to be involved, and what we need and how we need to support them. I know that you personally have identified a number of streets in West Chesterton that could be included, and we look forward to following that up with you. What the project initiation document does do is set a range of tasks that we need to complete by the 25th of February, including looking at how we let people know about the trial. That would include any website content, for example. So please be assured that the officers will be working together with the project board on this. Point two, yes, absolutely, resources do need to be allocated to communicating with residents about any necessary herbicide applications. Given the resources, signage is the most appropriate way of doing this. Officers are going to focus instead on developing the most effective set of web resources that they can to help raise awareness. And again, they will work with the project board on that. 3, 4 and 5, which I am going to take together. Yes, we absolutely agree. And we'll make sure that any health impacts, both negative or positive, are included in any communications with residents about herbicide applications or the trial itself. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Did the officer want to come in with anything further?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to give some further, thank you for the amendments, and just to give some further information and some reassurances. I'm going to be the project lead, and the PID was never intended to be at a granular detail at this stage. However, we will look to address the concerns around notifying people when we're going to carry out the spraying. The web resource will be a very effective method of achieving this, and we will start to look at those tasks between now and the 25th of February when the project plan will be signed off. Thank you.
Okay, so Anne, you have 2 minutes with any follow-up questions you might have.
Oh, hello. So can I just like to be absolutely certain that I've understood that you will actually be putting the resources in to a detailed website so residents can look up planned herbicide treatments by road and ward. That's one question. Could you just clarify that actually, yes, you are going to do that for me? And the second thing is that I couldn't see it anywhere absolutely clearly in the document, but I've asked if after 2022 herbicide treatments will end on the streets. Can you confirm that herbicide use will end on the pavements at the end of 2022? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collis, do you want to come in? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes is the answer about the web resource. Yeah, I don't think I need to say any more on that. In terms of your second question about herbicide use on streets, we very much hope so. We cannot predict the outcome of the trial, but that is the direction of travel, and we hope, to work towards that. Thank you. Thanks.
So before we move on to the substantial report, we have another public question from Pesticide Free Cambridge, which I think the officer is going to read out.
That's correct, Chair. I have a written statement and come questions from Pesticide Free Cambridge. We, Pesticide Free Cambridge, wish to submit the following questions to the Environment Community Scrutiny Committee this coming Thursday. They can't be present. We iterate our firm commitment to working with the City Council to make Cambridge pesticide free, starting with a complete end to herbicide use on land owned or managed by Cambridge City Council. In addition, we remain committed to working with communities, groups and residents to make this happen as quickly and as effectively as possible. Naturally, we welcome the Herbicide Reduction Plan, HRP, and the Herbicide-Free Streets proposal. However, we are disappointed to note that we still have no response to our minuted questions from the last meeting in October 2021, or our follow-up email to councillors 10th of December 2021. We have the following questions for Environment Community Scrutiny Committee on 27th of January 2022. 1. Although the pesticide-free motion of 22nd July stated that the Council would work directly with Pesticide Free Cambridge over the planned herbicide-free trials, to date we have only had informal talks with the biodiversity team and we have not been included in any formal discussions with the Council. When will Pesticide Free Cambridge be invited to join a working group to monitor the progress of the ward trials and herbicide-free streets and have input into related information campaigns and websites? 2. When will the City Council start to post notices of when herbicide spraying is due to take place across these wards and streets that are not being included in the HRP, and to erect information signage in areas that are undergoing herbicide-free trials? 3. Will the City Council operatives wear full PPE as is legally required when spraying herbicides? 4. Will steps be taken to include specific reference to the human health impacts of pesticide exposure in the HRP? We are concerned that the only health impacts mentioned in the current document are those connected with trip hazards posed by urban plants. Questions end. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the substantial report, and can I please ask? Oh, sorry. Oh, did you not read out the response?
I didn't have one, Chair.
All right, sorry. Sorry. Please, can I ask Councillor Collis to respond to the question?
Thank you very much, Chair. So yeah, I'll take these one by one. Firstly, I do want to thank the questioners and Pesticide Free Cambridge again for their continued commitment to this work, and also for those informal conversations with our biodiversity team. For this to succeed, which I believe is what we all want, both in the chamber and across the city, is going to need us all to work together. So yes, thank you for your commitment. As to the specifics of how we'll engage with Pesticide Free Cambridge, or indeed any other key partners, you'll see a reference to a stakeholder and comms plan in the appendix, the project initiation document. After today's decision, we're going to set up a project board to lead on the development of that plan, and we very much hope that Pesticide Free Cambridge will be involved in that. That could mean being part of the board itself or working directly with the project lead. We're obviously happy to discuss that and agree what will work best before the launch. So that's question 1. Question 2, we're developing our ideas on the best ways of letting residents know about intended spraying routes. And we do feel that it may well be that the best way of doing this is by using a website resource. As I think I mentioned earlier, because how and when we spray is subject to various environmental factors, we need the messaging to be easy to change and to adapt quickly. I think a website's probably a lot more suitable for this. Putting up and changing physical signs is going to take a lot more resourcing in terms of the operations team, in terms of their time. So it's unlikely that we're going to use physical signs. It's simply not practical at this stage. The stakeholder and comms plan already mentioned will need to focus on the best ways of getting that messaging out and spreading the word, and you'll see that that work is planned to be completed by the 25th of February. Question 3 about the PPE. The quick answer to this one is yes. Like other organisations, the council will complete risk assessments based on COSH data sheets, control of substances hazardous to health, and those data sheets determine the need for the use of PPE. We supply that PPE to operatives, and there is a duty and an expectation for them to wear that as directed. So yes is the answer to that. And question 4, the EQIA that officers have produced to support this report does, for example, in the section on age and disability, it does highlight a potentially negative impact in terms of trips and falls. It's important to look at these carefully and to make sure that this trial works for all our residents. However, the EQIA also highlights the important positive impact reducing or eliminating herbicide use and the use of chemicals in our environment can have on human health. It's something the council's very aware of. It's something we're very keen to address and counteract, and is a really important driver, I think, for all of us behind this work. I know Councillor Porras mentioned that before. So the web resources we're proposing, including an FAQ section, will include a full explanation of the benefits, including any health benefits as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collis. So we're now going to move on to the substantial item. Can I ask the presenting officer, Alistair Wilson, to introduce and present the report? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the contributions from the public speakers and also the opportunity to introduce the report. The report is intended to update on the progress towards the biodiversity and herbicide motions that were agreed in 2019 and 2021. The report is presented to set out our approach and gain confidence in the trial that is proposed. The project initiation document will be used by the project team to check and report on progress of the trial. The recommendations set out in 2.1 will approve the project initiation document for the purposes of the trial. It will also make Newnham and Arbury herbicide free for the period of the trial. It also creates the opportunity for herbicide-free streets as part of the ambition to be herbicide-free by the end of 2022. I am happy to take questions on the report and on the PID that supports the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to the debate. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Parr, then Councillor Hawke, and then Councillor Gilderdale. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think we would like to move an amendment, which, as you see, we've been discussing because we had no knowledge of the public question. That wasn't one we were aware of. But I think the Speaker does have a point. However, I also completely accept Councillor Collis's point that we can't amend the appendix. So would you like myself and Councillor Copley to let you know what we'd like to add as a recommendation now, or would you rather have the debate first? Because I have some questions separately, generally. And just to say, this is a really good thing. Thank you very much to Alistair and to Councillor Collis for pushing this forward. So this is hopefully to improve it rather than to object to it. Thank you, Chair. Let me know if you'd like me to move it now.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all agree that we love trees, we love our trees, and therefore I would like to ask whether whether herbicides will not be applied, particularly to areas around trees, and also that no other invasive methods will be used around trees, except maybe as a last resort the use of mulch to prevent weed from growing. This is because trimming around trees can be or is very disruptive and also often unnecessary. And in our view, and also the view of Pesticide-Free Cambridge, we would not want this to replace herbicide use. So can you please maybe confirm that trees are not included in any of these invasive procedures?
Okay, and Councillor Gilderdale.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question about whether we could have some more information on the collaboration between the city and county, and whether there is an aspiration for all of the county-wide assets to be herbicide-free in the city centre, and how this will go ahead. Thank you.
And I'll
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I think possibly 4. Would you like all 4 at once? So, yeah, just to say, again, to echo the thanks, particularly to Pesticide-Free Cambridge, who have worked incredibly hard on bringing forward this trial, and also notably to Councillor Porrer, who actually proposed this motion in the Chamber back in July and has worked very closely with Pesticide-Free Cambridge to bring it forward. I just wanted to note in relation to the public question that the original Liberal Democrat motion did actually include the request for signage on the streets. So it's a shame that the Labour group opposite did choose to remove that. And we can see, I think clearly here, there is a real public will to be informed of issues of safety when chemicals are being used on your streets. The answer we were given when this motion was brought forward in July relating to the signage was that, when we brought the motion forward in July, the reason for the delay to starting the trial now, as opposed to at that moment, was that we could be assured that the trial would be resourced properly, which I think we understood, much as it's frustrating to see more delay. But I would comment that it's a shame that that resourcing didn't include planning for how to add signs to the streets. I think no one looks on a website to see whether their street has been sprayed with chemicals. I'm not sure it's realistic to expect the public to do that. However, I'm sure there is some way in which we could look to resource putting signs on the street as people are spraying there, and that is actually a public safety issue. I think a website is also exclusionary. We know the members in Cambridge who are not online, who aren't comfortable checking a website. So in terms of an equality issue, I would really ask the... Nobody can hear me. I would really ask the group opposite and the Executive Council to reconsider that, so that everyone in Cambridge can be easily made aware of what is happening on their street. And also, hopefully, as time goes by, the number of the times when herbicides are used will be decreased. So surely we'll be expecting the signage required to also decrease as that happens. In terms of short specific questions, in terms of education around this, it's great to see Newnham and Arbury being brought forward as wards of the trial. I wanted to ask how residents in Newnham and Arbury will be informed about this, as obviously they will see a change at first when herbicides are not used. And it would be helpful, I think, if people are aware that this is a trial, so they might see a different level of weeding to what they're used to, so they're aware of what it is, rather than thinking it's the council being neglectful, so that there isn't then pushback, as obviously we all want the trial to succeed and the public to come with us on this. If I could just ask quickly about the pesticide-free streets, I was wondering if there's a plan for how that action will be brought forward to the public. How do streets opt in, and how will it be communicated and promoted? So it'd be great to have as many streets opting in as possible. And then my final question was about what happens at the end of the trial. As we can see, hopefully this will be successful and we'll be able to keep decreasing the streets and the areas where herbicides are used. Is there a success criteria in mind for what we need to achieve and what needs to be done in this trial in order for us to do that? So I was wondering if there's any thinking around the next steps towards hopefully removing herbicides completely. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I ask the officer to come in with the responses, and Councillor Collis, if she wants to add as well?
First of all, an apology. I think I may have missed Councillor Porter's questions in internet blackout. However, in terms of the other questions, in response to Councillor Hawke, certainly, particularly around trees, and particularly young trees that are very often trying to establish themselves in quite difficult environments, the use of herbicides is certainly not wanted. And so we when we're planting trees, we do put a lot of attention into making sure they establish successfully. So mulches, water bags, and herbicides are not part of those treatments. So in terms of particularly new trees, that's certainly a commitment we can make. We've also got a specification with the County Council about where we spray in respect to their assets, which often includes trees. And we certainly we're trying to avoid that, and the scenario where we're spraying round trees to allow ease of mowing. So stopping short of by not spraying round trees, we can actually stop mowing close to them. So that's the answer to those questions. In terms of Councillor Gilderdale, so in terms of the collaboration with the County Council, they've been really supportive with us in terms of wanting to find solutions that can be applied across the county. We have explained to them what our trial is likely to include, and they are on board. They are a collaborative partner. They are very keen for us to use their volunteer scheme they have established in terms of work on the highway. The City Council is going to take the lead around the volunteering schemes and use the County Council's framework. They have a published framework. It's available on their website. That does need a little bit of edit and change because it at the moment doesn't include for weed controls. We're planning to do that between now and the launch date. In respect of Councillor Payne's questions, signage is going to be a significant resource, have significant resource implications for streets and home spaces. The information is only going to be as accurate as the day the sign's put out. That may change as a consequence of a wet morning or a windy day where we can't actually get to apply the herbicides. That causes then a range of pressures in terms of having to change that sign, change the dates, change the information. Our preference would be, so that we can focus our efforts to the trial, would be for that to be a web-based resource where we can change that based on the environmental conditions each day. In terms of communicating to Arbury and to Newnham, we obviously will have to create a communications plan, stakeholder engagement plan. The intention is to have an article in Cambridge Matters. There's also the opportunity to have direct email, direct communications, particularly where we've got information around tenants and tenant areas, particularly in Arbury. It really will be about managing expectations to the trial and explain to people what they will see and what will be different, and how they then raise any issues or concerns with us. We'll also take the opportunity in the communications plan to sell the street free trial in terms of where the benefits will be. With regards to the street free option, we are modelling our response on a product that's already been successfully used in Lambeth, and with Lambeth there's a whole web resource available to residents to sign up to or make a commitment to a herbicide free street. There's a range of resource then given to those residents and help them with the volunteering. It may be tools, it may be equipment, it may be help, it may be advice. We would expect there to be some form of consensus buy-in in terms of the option to take a street to be pesticide free. In terms of the trial and its success criteria, I think that's going to be around how well the asset is maintained. There'll be some regular inspections to check that we're not actually affecting the street asset. There will be a range of complaints potentially that we can give some feed. There'll be complaints that we can analyse and take information from and understand where people have got concerns. Another measure of success will possibly be the number of streets that we actually take through the Street Free programme. The number of volunteer hours will be a success, and equally all the other trial treatments that we're going to use during the trial itself. So, for instance, mechanical sweepers, hand weeding, foams. There's a hot water treatment product. There's a whole range of other things we're going to use in that trial area. I think I've covered all those questions.
Did you answer Councillor Porter's questions? I can't remember.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I missed the questions at the beginning. Sorry.
Councillor Parr didn't have a chance to ask her questions as we moved on to the amendment.
Oh, right, sorry. So Councillor Ashton had your hand up first and then Councillor Parr, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I think all our residents get very frustrated about the time we spend talking about dotting I's and crossing T's. July 2019, we passed a motion to get cracking on this. And I know political correctness, we have to make sure we do it the best way we can. But we need to make a start and get this trial going. We won't get it done the way everybody likes because that's the nature of the way things happen. But we need to make a start. And I was going to suggest Cambridge Matters because it's delivered to every household. And I think in Cambridge Matters, it needs to be a real good focus on about what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and why that will benefit people as well. But I think sometimes we just need to get on with these things because everybody wants it done. So, crack on with it. And again, we've got residents association groups. So again, they can be notified what's going on as well. They can diverse it down to what's going on as well. And we never said we won't do signage. It says in the report, signage may be considered. And Alistair gave a very good reason why signage would be very difficult to keep updated. Thank you.
Councillor Parr and Councillor Copley, please.
Very much. I'm really pleased to see this whole proposal going forwards as a proper trial with 2 wards. So I've got 4 short questions and 1 further comment on the signage discussion. So the first is, I know Alistair will have been privy to kind of all the requests of different wards that wanted to be selected for the trial. I've had lots of requests from Abbey Ward, and I wondered if you would be able to share the reasoning that Abbey Ward wasn't chosen, is my first question. My second was just a request for the Herbicide Free Street Volunteer Group to be advertised to the Street and Open Spaces Volunteer Scheme members, because I would imagine there'll be some of the most likely people that would be excited about this. My third question was about management companies of flats. It's quite hard to get kind of emails for people, or often can be for residents across Cambridge, but management companies are likely to know who the leaseholder or owner is that could send it down to the tenants. And I'd just like to suggest that as a way to let people know about the trial is happening. And also, potentially the management company could engage with this further. I know the management company of my block of flats uses glyphosate, and I've had discussions with about it, but it would just be a really good kind of outreach opportunity as well as getting information out there. And then the last question was just about the slip risk. I suppose that would be, a concern if some people were to be injured as a result. And so the question is whether we know what kind of surfaces, locations, angles, drains, etc. Is there knowledge about what kind of places are the highest risk of injury, so that we could then direct resource to those where we think there's most likely that some injury could happen. And then finally, just to comment on the signage, we've talked about getting signs up before treatment happened and how that would be very difficult because it often changes with weather conditions. So my proposal is, could we not get a kind of simple red stripy sticker which says herbicides were sprayed on this street with the date, that you could stick on a lamppost as you do it, for the operatives to do. I obviously have sprayed a street, but I would hope that that would be feasible and realistic, and then people could see them up and around and know exactly when it happened, because I know the public speaker commented that sometimes they can last many weeks, but then you could potentially also have a link to a web page or a QR code or something, and then maybe you could link and find out about this website. But yeah, that's my proposal, as what I hope could be a feasible way for people to know that herbicides have just gone out on their street. So that's everything. Thank you.
And Councillor Parr, is your mic working?
I'm hoping, thank you. I'm not sure if the camera's following me, but I hope you can hear my voice. Thank you very much. So I just had a couple more points. I've been working with Pesticide Free Cambridge, as I've said before. I'm really grateful for their support on this. I know they've been talking to officers as well, and they would welcome the formal consultation I think Councillor Collis has already mentioned. I wanted to just check, we haven't actually got a part of the table about mechanical weeding rather than just manual weeding. And I think that's quite important because it obviously is a slightly different thing. It is less labour intensive in the sense that we can use brushes and things. So I wondered if the officer could just confirm whether that could be added in as one of the specific trials that we will be looking at, so it's not rolled into the manual weeding as well. Secondly, I know Pesticide Free Cambridge are also really keen to get information out to residents that if it's council-owned land, residents shouldn't be putting pesticides and herbicides on it either. And I wondered if we could add that to the information website that we've been talking about, for example, where we're hopefully publishing the dates and times of any planned treatments. And I think also add on to that, as Councillor Copley said, where people can volunteer and as much information as possible. So, and also just allow the public to report where they perhaps see herbicides being used when they shouldn't be, because I think at the moment there's not a particularly clear route to report that. And just to pick up on the trees that Councillor Hout mentioned, I think it's the strimming as well. I think Pesticide Free Cambridge and ourselves are quite keen to make sure that they aren't strimmed, because I think that's equally damaging to kind of some of the pollinator plants that do tend to grow around the bases of trees. And thank you, Chair. And then I'm very happy to move the amendment with Councillor Copley when you'd like me to. Thank you.
If the officer can take those questions, that would be great.
Great, thank you, Chair. Just in responding to Councillor Ashton, I totally understand the frustrations around getting on and doing the work. I have some confidence in that, having spent some time with Lambeth Council, we are just behind their crest of a wave in terms of getting a project that we can all get behind in terms of a trial. And I hear the point about residents groups as well, and making sure they're involved with the trial. With regards to Councillor Copley, the reasons why we chose both Newnham and Arbury for the trial is that both wards have a variety of different street types. So, for instance, we've got residential terrace streets with private gardens, comparing us with estates with communal garden areas. So these two ward types give us opportunity to compare and contrast how the trial is working in those two types of areas. The distinctly different natures will prompt different responses from each of the wards, and we need these to consider how a trial is successful or not before we start looking at sending across Cambridge. We did have a range of requests, including Abbey. We also had requests from West Chesterton to be included in the trial, and we identified very early on that there will be requests. Therefore, we introduced the herbicide-free street scheme, which allows those streets, unfortunate enough not to be in the trial area, to at least mobilise on a localised area. And we purposely haven't defined street in terms of an entity. It could be an area such as Feiston Road Estate. It could be DeFreville Estate. So there's scope there to allow people to opt in. Yes, to the volunteer, Streets and Open Space volunteer scheme. We do believe that there's some great opportunities here in terms of increasing their capability, but also their capacity in helping us to achieve the trial. Management companies, we may find that difficult, but certainly we'll put that into the communications plan, stakeholder communications plan, as an area to investigate. With regards to slips, trips and falls, we do use a best practice guide, which I can't recall, I may have put it into the background paper to the report, but within that there are 6 levels of weed growth, and each one has a different intervention. So we'll be monitoring those through the trial. We may need to make some treatments. A range of things may be considered, including the types of things we set out before. I really do like the sticker idea, and it's something I definitely will take forward. I think it's something we could possibly easily achieve through the trial. It's a simple, low-cost option and something an operative can do once they've visited that street. And I also like the idea of having some way of a QR code to give people more information and direct them to the web page. So certainly we'll pick that up. So thank you very much for that. With regards to the mechanical sweeping, yes, I noted on that, and we are currently looking at a range of tools and equipment that we're going to need to support that trial. And a weed ripper is in there. It's one of the things tools we've looked at. It is also in the guidance notes I've just made reference to, which I can circulate if people would like to have a look at those. In terms of making sure we're giving information to residents, there's a whole range of tools and skills we can use, particularly around making sure that we're getting the message to them. The point about streaming, yes, streaming is probably a tree killer, to be fair, and something that we are trying to instill into staff not to do around trees. So thank you for those questions.
Do we have any final debate before we move on to the amendment? No? Okay, so do we have someone to propose the amendment? Yeah, Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just mindful, would it be helpful if we wrote the amendment down and officers could put it up on the screen? We're very happy to do that so we can share it rather than reading it out. I'm mindful we do that planning quite often if you want to have a 5-minute break whilst we do that, but if not, I can read it out. Just because I'm mindful of this. We've got myself, Councillor Copley, we've got quite a bit of text. Well, it's not huge, but...
Can I just clarify, is it the amendment proposed by the public speaker or is it a different amendment?
So what we've done is we've taken on board some of the points, but we've also, I think, accepted some of the issues that the Executive Councillor addressed. So it will be different, which is why I thought you might want a chance to actually read it rather than have it read out to you. Yes, not very neat. We might have to read it to you, but yes.
Rather than delay proceedings any further, if you can just read it through.
Sorry, as we didn't know about the public amendment, we're trying to amend it as we go along to try and account for your debate and Councillor Collis's things. Bear with me one moment. So the first part will be to add figure D to the current recommendation, so not the appendix, the actual recommendation to the report, which is on page 66. And that would say, is everyone okay with that? Publishing the planned dates online of herbicide treatments for the whole of the city for 2022, with information available by both ward and by road. So in effect, I think, if I've understood correctly, summing up what Councillor Collis and Alistair have already, the officer, have said they would be agreeable to. And I'll just pass to Councillor Copley, who will
Move the second part.
Okay, Councillor Collis.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Councillor Copley, Councillor Porrer. I would really prefer this to be written down. I can hear people talking around the chamber, and I'm actually quite hard of hearing. It's really difficult for me to follow unless it's written down. So, in the interest of getting this right, if we could have a short break whilst it's written down, is that okay? Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have a 5-minute adjournment. So we've just had an adjournment. Do you get the amendment printed up and ready? So welcome back to members of the public who are watching, officers as well. So can we have someone to propose the amendment? Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to speak to it now? Or would you like me to? Well, I haven't actually got it to read out as we've now printed out, but if the members of the public would like to hear, but I'm happy to speak to it in the interim if that helps.
You're happy to speak to it, that would be great.
So, myself and Councillor Copley would like to just make these slight amendments in the light of the public question that came in earlier, which we thought did have a valid point, though we do, as I mentioned, accept Councillor Collis's point that we can't amend an appendix. That would be amending a motion that needs to go through council. So we hope that the 3 minor amendments we're suggesting are not too drastic. The first one, I'm trying to remember which order we did them in now, which is difficult without seeing them in front of me. Yeah, so the first was to ask that there should be a website on which we publish, at least online, the details of which streets will be treated with herbicides, with the proposed dates and times. And I do understand that that may need to have a little rider to say they may be delayed for bad weather. I understand that we do have that information because obviously it's what we use to manage our officers who go out and do this work for us. Councillor Copley, would you like to speak to the other 2? Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
So the second and third will just get the specific text of, but sorry, I'll just read it out, that might be easier. So the first that Councillor Porra was just discussing was publishing the planned dates online of herbicide treatments for the whole city for 2022, with information available both by ward and road. The next 2 are firstly, committing to mark streets treated with herbicides with simple signs such as stickers on lampposts. And the third and final one is committing to end herbicide treatments on streets and open spaces in the city in 2022, subject to a successful trial.
Okay, so I'm assuming that Councillor Parr's proposing and Councillor Copley seconding. Yes, okay. So just before we move on to debate, can I ask for the officer, Alistair, to come in and give his view on it, and also the executive councillor as well?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll probably take the items in reverse order. So I don't have the script in front of me, so I'm just going off memory. But in terms of the commitment to end use of herbicides after the end of the 22 and a successful trial, I would argue that is a given from the motion that was approved in July. There's a commitment in the motion to do that, so possibly item F is not required. With regard to item E and the stickers on, there's quite a lot to understand here in terms of the message, the key messages, the purpose. There's a lot of we need to understand as to whether or not we even got permission. Would it be classed as fly posting? So there's a lot of uncertainty here in terms of whether or not we practically can do it in terms of permissions. And with regards to the website, there is a commitment in the project initiation document for the project boards to have a position by the 25th of February around the how, when and where we make the reporting of herbicide available. So the items, I think, are actually covered by the substantive report and the project initiation document in the back of the report. Thank you.
Anything further to add, Councillor Collis?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to look at this pragmatically. I'm going to be very brief. I don't think this needs an amendment for some of the reasons that Alistair has outlined. D, I think, is in the plan already. F in the original amended motion, and it's something we already achieve on parks. I think adding items at this late stage, I think risks delay. So what I want us to do is to approve the report and all of us work with officers to achieve what we want. As Alistair said, there's lots of uncertainty, you know, particularly around E. There's lots more we need to understand. And I would feel uneasy about us approving that now. So what I'm proposing to do is delegate authority for the sign-off of the project initiation document to the head of environmental services once those discussions have happened and taken place. Yeah, that's it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collis. Does anyone else want to comment before we move to the vote on the amendment? Councillor Power and then Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping my microphone's working this time. Excellent. I think I do understand where Councillor Collis is coming from, absolutely. But I think for us, particularly in D, we're very keen that it is by ward and road to allow people to be able to search, particularly if there may be delays getting actual signage in situ. So I would, to me, this does add something and also gives a sort of concrete guarantee that that would be available. E, I understand the concerns of the officer. I mean, I'm sure Councillor Copley may want to comment as well, but we're saying with simple signs such as stickers, so we're not saying it has to be stickers, we're just saying some kind of signage. And again, I take your point on F, but I do think it's worth reiterating, because whilst it was in the motion, this is about a project with the hope to end it. We agree that the public speaker had asked for it to be in there just to end it definitely, which obviously, given that we've got a trial, would prejudice the outcome of the trial, so which is why we've not accepted that. But we did want to put it in because I just think it reiterates a commitment. I have no doubt that Councillor Collis is committed to this. This is not a suggestion that you're not, but I think we just need to be really clear. There is a biodiversity emergency, so that's why we're moving these three parts. I don't know if Councillor Copley wants to add anything to that.
Sorry, Councillor Sweeney first.
Yes, thank you. I think we've all established that this has been something that the council has discussed for a long period of time and we want to get moving on it. I'm concerned that adding additions to the trial at this late stage has implications for the officers that have not been costed. And we, however minimal it might be to move the data from one department to another to get it onto the website, there is a staffing implication and a time implication for that. So I think I would like to just propose that we get this trial started. And it is a trial. We can look at what else needs to be added as we hopefully are successful and can roll it out across the city.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to point out, we don't send out letters or signage when we do our current pesticides, when we're going around the streets and doing everything. It's done without people realising. And to a certain degree, that's far worse what's been being sprayed in the past than what we're saying now. So again, we need to get moving on the trial. I understand why we want to try and make it as watertight as possible. But I think the officer has pointed out the pitfalls of trying to delay while we work out the signage. And for instance, if the signage was done to say it's going to start on this day, but there's a problem with the weather, then that signage is all wrong again. So I think we need to trust the officers to get on with this and move it forward.
Could I just clarify, we'd like the vote to be taken in parts for each section. And just also one other suggestion, which is that we often advertise planning applications by tying items to lampposts. So that's another potential option if the sticking part is deemed fly posting.
We should stick to the parts that are on the written document. Were you suggesting a further amendment to the amendment?
Oh no, sorry, I was saying, can we vote for A, then B, then C on the main three, and then for each of the three bullet points of our amendment, one at a time, is what I was saying.
Okay.
Rather than voting on everything all at once.
Okay.
So people can say if they agree with one or another of them.
Alistair, did you want to come back on I think there was a question from Councillor Power at the beginning of that round.
In respect of what?
I think there was something you asked to be clarified, wasn't there? Okay, so there wasn't anything further you wanted to add, no? No. Okay, let's move to the vote then. So, I don't have the paper in front of me. Okay, so we'll check each of the three separately then. So those in favour of point D, raise your hands. Sorry, are you? Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, what I was checking, I was just checking that we're voting now to accept the amendments, and that's all. No, sorry, Chair, I was just making sure in the process, it's clear in my mind that the committee is now going to decide whether it wants to move, whether it wants to take D, E and F, and then depending on how that moves, we then move to the substantive, and then if any of these have come through, then they become part of the substantive.
Yeah, so that's what we were doing. We were doing the amendments first.
Thank you, yes. Or accept the amendment D, Chair.
We'll do it at the end, I think, yeah.
And then against.
Yeah, so can I have a show of hands for those against?
Six against, Chair, so it falls.
Okay, now we're moving on to amendment E. Those in favour?
4, Chair.
Those against?
Yeah, 6 against, Chair, so it falls.
And amendment F. Those in favour?
4 in favour, Chair.
And those against?
6 against, so that falls, Chair.
Okay, so now moving on to, so that amendment is not carried. So now moving on to the substantial report. Sorry, it's really been a long day. Those in favour, can you raise your hand?
Yeah, that's all, Chair, except them.
Okay, so yeah, so that was carried unanimously. Can I now ask the Executive Councillor if she accepts the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I want to say how excited I am to see this going forward. I think we probably all are. Thank you to everyone in the chamber, including Councillor Porra for her work on this, and thank you to the officer team for the time they've put in as well. So yes, I do accept the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Collis. So now we're going to move on to agenda item 8, review of use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. The presenting officer is Tom Lewis, Head of Legal Practice, and there's no public speakers. So please could I ask Tom Lewis to introduce this item?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me on my remote link here?
Yep.
Excellent. Good. That's a jolly good piece of news. So this is the annual report on the RIPA legislation. I'm sure many members are familiar with this. It is one where we bring it to before the committee on an annual basis, despite the fact that for this year, as with a number of previous years, we haven't actually engaged the RIPA authorisation mechanism because it's important that we keep it in members' mind, and also that in the event that there were a need to use it, it has been before members for scrutiny. It is one where last year we were subject to an inspection by the central government regulatory agency in terms of our RIPA procedures, policy, officer training and whatnot, and we pass that with flying colours. So this is, again, a report where I bring it before committee for their attention and for their consideration, but it is one where I have nothing to report in terms of use for this year, and therefore it is one where I would like to commend the report to the committee. There are a number of recommendations in the second section which should the committee wish, I can read at the relevant time, and of course happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So do we have any debate? So I'm just going to make a point. So I have very strong concerns about the use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. I think there's very widely documented risks of abuse of this legislation, particularly against ethnic minority communities, where it can often be used disproportionately. And I know human rights organisations such as Amnesty International have very strong concerns about the use of this legislation. So I just wanted to say I'm very heartened to see that it's used so infrequently in Cambridge. I think it's only twice in the past 10 years, and I very much hope this continues. No further debates, so we'll move on to the the vote. Can all members here in favour of this being accepted, please raise your hands.
It's unanimous, Chair.
And those against? Oh, yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. So does the Executive Councillor wish to accept this recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. Thank you to Tom for your report. Like Councillor Healy, I'm really encouraged to see that this is very sparingly used and that the Council has strong safeguards in place. So, yes, I do accept that. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to agenda item 9. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Just for information, Chair, agenda item 9 is a non-entity. It's a heading that I should have made item 10, 9A. Item 10 is in effect an information report where the decision has been made already by the Exec Council and we brought it back to committee for information. I hope it's clear, perhaps no debate needed, but if councillors have questions, we can take them.
Great, thanks for clarifying. So we'll now move on to agenda item 10 in relation to the Cambridge South Station consultation response.
It's 9 and 10, Chair. I was sorry, Chair, I was trying to cover 9 and 10 at the same time, so it's 9 and 10. Well, 9 doesn't exist, 10 was the information report, the recorded decision, which is just an information report. Okay. Hopefully we can note and move on if the committee are happy.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to item 11, which is the review of operation of the Council's out-of-hours noise service. The presenting officer is Claire Adelizi, team manager. Oh, sorry, I've just been informed it's just been changed during the meeting, so it's going to be Yvonne O'Donnell, and there's no public speakers. So please could I invite Yvonne to introduce this item? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is a review of the out-of-hours noise service. Following a review of the service and the difficulty to recruit in some of the vacant posts, it was agreed that we would trial a new service for a 3-month period. This has allowed officers to use new technologies and equipment to support residents to gather evidence, to allow officers to investigate and take appropriate action where residents are affected by noise. The new trial has been operating since the 1st of October, and this has allowed officers to really focus on the noise issues which we are able to action. The new trial towards a proactive pre-arranged visit or installation of noise equipment and monitoring equipment as part of the noise investigation procedure means that such actions, either visits or installs of equipment, can be conducted at times when the nuisance is more likely to be witnessed and where witnessed. This also allows us to use the noise app and the diary sheets, looking at reoccurring patterns to allow us to identify when the issues are more likely to be witnessed. The new trial provides a better, more focused service to our residents and provides resources within the team to support residents and to action where we are able to do so. It allows officers to triage cases at an early stage of the investigation and manage expectations on cases where we are unable to action. That's a summary of the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. So I know there's been an amendment put forward, but I think what we'll do is we'll do the debate first and we'll take the amendment afterwards. So is there any debate on this report? Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Yvonne. And Yvonne, please pass on our thanks to Claire for producing an excellent report. I'll take this mask off just while I'm talking. Although noise pollution can sometimes, when you're up against it, make you feel that the only thing that will work is to get someone official there and then to witness it, the reality is that an increasing focus on evidence gathering is what is really going to make the difference. And I know that from personal experience of casework in Arbury, where it's the records, and you mentioned both the electronic devices that we have, but that we can also offer the diaries. And I know for a fact that some residents are using a combination of the audio capture equipment and the diary sheets, and been getting excellent support from your officers in order to get those processes going. And I know directly from residents that that is more meaningful, and in terms of getting the problem stopped, it's more meaningful and more efficacious than the immediately comforting fix or the immediately comforting sticking plaster of a visit at any time of day or night from an official person, which I think might soothe the nerves for a short time while the person is there, and help being your witness and being your giving moral support and emotional support. But then once that person has gone, unless you're doing the evidence gathering, that you're suddenly stranded again. So I think the overall move, this change goes in the right direction, and we on this side certainly see the logic of the change. But Yvonne, if I could put to you just one general question, a sort of imaginary scenario type question, just so that we know how to share information about the change to any residents that may want to query or probe a bit further. Imagine a scenario where I'm up against a really horrible noise, a bit of noise pollution. What would be the steps with the new system? What would be the steps that I would go through? Would you be kind enough to just walk and talk us through how it will be with when you don't have the out of hours emergency style call in, but rather the emphasis on recording and capturing? How will it feel different to me as a resident? Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you. So basically, the reporting will still be the same. So if you have got a resident who's been impacted by their neighbour's noise or industrial noise, then they can ring through to the CSC during the working day, but they can still also record, put a service request into our call handling centre at the CCTV, so that it at least can be recorded at that time. An officer will then contact the complainant within 3 working days, but hopefully the next working day. And they will then talk them through the app, what the options are, whether they want the app, whether they want the diary sheet. And it's important at that point that we manage their expectations about what the service can provide. But this is what we would have already done anyway. If it was on an out of hours, they would have had the same conversation. So the out of hours previously wouldn't necessarily instigate a visit straight away. They would have a conversation with the officer explaining what needs to be done. Again, the same advice would be, have you contacted your neighbours? Have you told them that they're impacting on you? And quite often they hadn't. And there's good reasons why they may not have done, but sometimes that just resolves it immediately if we can sort neighbourhood disputes out at a really early stage. The officer will then go through the app with the person and then ask them to fill in diary sheets that we will then have returned to us with the various noise recordings or the various diary sheets. We will then look at those diary sheets and those noise recordings, and that allow us to decide whether there actually is a problem that we can actually resolve, because in a number of our cases we're going back to the resident later on down the investigation and saying this isn't actually something we can resolve. We can't stop children playing outside. We can't stop bouncy balls against the walls. You know, everyday living, it could be an insulation problem. So it does allow us to triage those issues sort of at the early stage of an investigation, and therefore help residents and customers with managing what the council can actually do and what the other options are out taking their own civil proceedings. So once we gather that information around the app or the diary and we see a recurring pattern, we will then speak to the customer and arrange whether they want a day visit, a night visit, depending on where the recurring issue is, or installing the noise equipment. And then once we've gathered that evidence, then we can proceed to dealing with the statutory noise nuisance as we would do in any other case. So the difference really is we haven't got that person at the end of the phone at night, but most of the other processes remain the same, and it just does allow us to triage cases that we probably wouldn't be able to deal with legally at a very early stage.
Yvonne, if I could just say, also pay tribute to your team for the mediation between neighbours. I've seen that working really well. And it's great that that's in the mix, that we haven't forgotten that just getting people talking to one another is often the best way forward. And, you know, with a bit of luck, you know, good friendships can come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further debate? Councillor Hawke and Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I noticed on the council website that the noise app is mentioned somewhere at the bottom of the middle of that page, you know, report a noise issue. So without much explanation of what the significance of this app is, where to get it from, how to use it, who should use it. And I think residents and also councillors would benefit from a more detailed description of that. And our neighbours in the east actually have a little website like that. So East Cambridgeshire District Council, that's where I actually found some information about it. And it seems to be easy to use. I managed to create an account quite quickly, but I think a bit of more information on the website would be helpful. And that would help us as councillors to also then tell our residents what they should do, just also in response to the previous question, so that we can then be, the messengers, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take that point on board.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Yvonne, for bringing this report. It's really clear and really helpful to read. I know on our side, I think us and Councillor Copley as well, I think initially just asked questions about the sudden change to the out-of-hours service, because it wasn't a change we were aware that was happening. I don't know if our colleagues opposite were or not. So the first thing we heard were residents at the end of emails or the phone saying the City Council's removed its out-of-hours service. And we were left going, oh goodness, trying to manage the damage of that. So one thing, and I recognise that there were difficulties in that as the service was being handed over as Suzanne Hemingway left us. So I recognise that was not a usual situation and not what would have been the plan to happen. But given that it is quite a significant change, and I think we may all here play a role in working with our residents to help them understand the importance of the investigation and gathering evidence and giving clear information, We've talked about this briefly before, Yvonne, but I wondered if, just to public state, would it be possible to ask for a councillor training session, just to talk us all through how the new service works, how the noise app works, and just make sure we're all well able to communicate that to our residents. And I just wanted to ask a second quick question of, can I just ask for clarity around what happens if a resident does call the out-of-hours phone number out of hours? As the report seems to suggest, they go to a call handling centre, but then you've also talked about it being recorded. So I just wanted to sort of clarify whether they speak to an answer phone, and if so, what does that say and what have they asked, or do they speak to a person? As I just wasn't quite sure, and I'm sorry if that's my not reading it properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Just on your first point, absolutely, we are planning to do a members briefing on supporting members on how they can support their residents in the area. So we will definitely do a member briefing after this committee. So absolutely, that's definitely on my list of things to do. With regards to the call handling centre, the call handling centre CCTV, that is there are a number of people that work in the call centre and the call handling centre. I think they have 1 or 2 officers in there 24/7. The idea is that they will speak to an individual, and the call handling centre takes all the council's emergency services, so it can be quite busy. And if they are busy and the lines are engaged, then there is an option to leave a message on the answer machine. And that will then be sent back to the daytime officers the next working day. But the idea is really for somebody to be able to speak to somebody on the night, just to take the details of the location of the noise and the details of the complainant.
Councillor Payne.
Can I just ask a really quick follow-up, Chair? Thank you very much. Thank you, Yvonne. That's really helpful. And that explains some of the sort of conflicting reports we've had from our residents about whether it's an answer phone or a person. Can I just ask, with the people they speak to at the call handling centre, as hopefully they do, what sort of training has been in place for them to make sure they're asking the right questions to ascertain whether it's a nuisance noise, whether it's repetitive, etc.? Obviously, there's certain criteria for us needed to investigate it, which that person needs to be able to ascertain.
Yes, so they have all had the training. Certainly they've had the training on obtaining the information that is required for officers to make contact, but every call that we receive via the call handling unit will be then, they will then get a personal call from a case officer, as I said, the next working day. The call handling centre uses our environmental health database to record all that information. So it is recorded on our database that is shared between the Environmental Health Department and the CCTV. So there has been adequate training on how to use the system, the new service that we're providing, and what information they should be gathering.
Councillor Copley.
Thank you very much for your report, Yvonne. I've got a few questions which I'll bring all together. And I noticed it commented in the report that the new service was in line with kind of other authorities. I know there'll be an amendment to bring back a meeting later. So my first question would be, if assuming that amendment passes, could we have some kind of information about kind of benchmarking about how we're doing to other authorities? And then the second one was just to help us see how the noise service is working, whether we could have a sort of flow chart of what typically happens. So like the initial call, then perhaps the resident may choose not to follow it up, but then if they do, what proportion of residents then get a visit or get noise equipment put in? So you could see what numbers of people sort of are making this initial call and then no longer following it up versus are engaging and having support from the service in different ways. And then sort of in another way of, to answer the question, like, is this service providing what residents need, was if we could have some kind of, it was noted that there was a lack of complaints about this change in the service, but could we proactively engage in, say, a sample of residents who've contacted the noise service to see if they're satisfied with the service that they had in this new version of it. My next question was about I think the real question is this producing better outcomes or good enough outcomes for residents? And I noticed that it said that the visits conducted within the trial period have led to necessary progression of noise complaint investigations, but have not resulted in any noise nuisance being witnessed. And I wasn't clear whether that would be what could be expected within the 3-month period, because we're clearly in a kind of dense, noisy city with lots of noisy industrial and domestic things happening. So I don't know, would it be normal to expect that a noise nuisance would not have been witnessed during that period, is my next question. I also noticed that the report said that officers made an out-of-hours visit on a single occasion. So my question was, do we know how often, if ever, beyond that one occasion where it happened, residents kind of requested out-of-hours, is it the patients wanted more out-of-hours but it wasn't deemed appropriate, or there was one patient who speaking as if I'm in the hospital. There's one resident, I don't know if I said that once more than one. There was one resident who wanted an out-of-hours visit, and that was, and there was one visit as a result. I think I already asked what proportion of the contacts resulted in professional noise equipment being lent. I think that would be really kind of interesting for us to know. And then finally was just about proactive work. So the term proactive came up quite a few times in the report. I've met a couple of residents who have either been the recipient of threats as a result of noise complaints, or have admitted to threatening other residents as a result of noise nuisance. And in both scenarios, it sounded as though the resident and the other resident who'd done the threatening didn't know about potential help through this system. So could kind of, as part of it, information in things like Cambridge Matters to let people know that there is support, the kind of mediation that Councillor Shield mentioned. Maybe we could have leaflets in food hubs, but just to reach out to people to know that this service kind of is here to help with this, these kind of problems. And then the final question, I'm sorry there's been so many, was just about whether there's any remit in the service about doing proactive work for things that are expected to cause a noise nuisance or serious noise disturbances, such as major building work, major industrial units, i.e. do we kind of monitor, investigate, engage with those kind of establishments like building developments and major industrial employment centres, kind of so that independent information is known about what's going on. So that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
I'll just take a question from Councillor Aston first, and then we can do all the answers together. Oh, really? Okay. Okay, Councillor Porra, and then Councillor Aston, and then we'll do all. Is that the last round now? Yeah. Yeah. So that's the last two questions, Porra and Aston.
My microphone, okay, it's gone red now. Thank you. It's a very quick question. I just wanted the office to confirm, obviously we still do have the capacity to do out of hours calls. So for example, if you know that you need to attend on a certain day to see something reactively, can I just confirm that budget-wise you're satisfied that you can still do that? I appreciate you won't be going out on the night, but if, for example, there's a recurrent thing where you feel it's important that someone goes out at midnight, that this is not cutting the budget to do that, because obviously that's one of the concerns of residents. It is at least to know that we can still react to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is amazing, really, because we've had this 2 years of lockdown where we've been locked inside, and we would have thought the noise levels would have been intolerable for most people, yet the report is quite clear in its findings about how many complaints we've received. So if we look at table 1, 1,398 complaints in 2018-19. The following year, it only dropped to 176. But last year, it dropped by 447. a massive reduction in noise complaints. And then if we look at table 2, where we're looking at out of hours noise October to December, we see again an amazing staggering reduction of 324, 249, not too many, but then 102, and then last year just 10. So it's obvious why we've had to look at how we're operating and the best ways of providing a service. So yes, we've all got questions concerning the service, but obviously, as we've heard from the officer, that service is still going to be there, and maybe as communication to our residents as how we are doing that service. It's not being stopped, it's just doing it more effectively and more efficiently. So I'd like to thank the officer for having tables that make it so clear and so obvious why we need to look at what we're doing at this moment in time. Thank you.
Yvonne, are you happy to take the answers now yet?
Yep, hopefully I've covered everything on this. So just going back to Councillor Copley's questions, with regards to the other local authorities in the country, we were one of the only local authorities left in the country to provide such a high level service with our out of hours service. So we are now moving more in line with most of the other local authorities where we've got dense population. So we have compared ourselves to places like London, Ipswich, Norwich, Oxford, who actually are probably, some of them are even delivering a more reduced service than we are currently proposing. Our surrounding districts within the Peterborough and Cambridgeshire don't provide any service whatsoever to this level. So in comparison, we are still providing a really good service to our residents in a much more focused way. Happy to provide a flowchart on the procedures, absolutely, and we could do that as part of our member briefing that I've been asked to do, so happy to do that. Also happy to do some feedback about what the people that are using the service now, how they feel the service is going, and providing some feedback. So yeah, feedback forms, more than happy to ask people how we can improve the service more, what they found useful, what they found not so useful, and it would be good to evaluate that feedback from them. I think the main thing around the outcomes for residents is they will have a much more focused response by officers. They will be delegated a designated case office for them during the lifespan of the investigation, so they will have a single point of contact to go to when they have got any concerns. The biggest improvement, I think, is the triage system. By triaging out what we can and cannot do will help residents enormously to be able to manage their expectations. I mean, we get back when we had the full out of hours, we were getting all sorts of complaints from people who felt that the service was there to just ring and complain about something. And this way we can triage it in a much more improved way. And that will it's about managing residents' expectations about what the council can and cannot do. And that will just allow us to be really focused on the areas of work that we can actually do and support residents. As I said, we do get all sorts of complaints, which obviously has an impact on people living in their own homes, but really it's managing to say this is something the council really can't deal with, and it may be a neighbour resolution issue that you need to go down a different route. So for residents, I think this is such a much better outcome, and they will have dedicated a resource for their specific case. With regards to the report about the 1 out of hours noise visit, if you look through the report, we have had, in the last 3 months, we've had about 100 new cases, of which a third have engaged with the app. And of those third, so say 27, I think, of the 27th, there has been 27 proactive visits. Going back to Councillor Ashton's point, we're actually getting much more noise complaints because people are working from home. They're much more sensitized to what's around them working from home. So we're actually getting more daytime visits and more daytime complaints. And so of the 27 complainants who have engaged with us, 26 have received a daytime visit and only one has received an out of hours visit. So that's the reasoning for that statistic. And then proportionally, 9 of those have also received the noise equipment that's been installed into their property. The noise equipment gets installed for a 7-day period. We've only up to recently had one noise equipment, so we've now purchased a second noise equipment so we can get more installs in for more properties. So that is really the reasoning why it looks like we've only actually done one out of hours noise visit, but and that was down to the request of the resident. So if the residents had requested more nighttime visits, that would have taken place, but that request hasn't happened. And as far as I'm aware, we've never refused somebody to have a proactive visit. I'm just going through my notes. Absolutely, communication is key on how we proactively let people know. We've actually put an article into open doors for our city homes tenants, because we tend to get a lot of city home tenants complainants. So they are now aware. We've told the police, we've informed antisocial behaviour teams, we've informed city homes. We're looking to put an article into Cambridge Matters as well, so all residents are aware of the new service that we are offering. So any other ideas how we can promote this, and hopefully the member briefing will also support that communication out to residents. And then the final question, I think, from Councillor Copley was about the proactive expected noise. So perhaps this isn't in the report, but the other team I've got is the Environmental Health and Quality and Growth team. They look at all planning applications that come through, and where we believe that there may be a potential noise issue, we condition those works. So we then deal with any planning applications. We can actually condition anything that we believe is a odour, dust, noise or lighting issue, where we can appropriately condition it. So any major building works, any construction sites have all been given those conditions, and any breach of those conditions will either be referred to the planning department, or we will then go out and do some more proactive inspections. As an example, I've got some planned inspections to go out on Monday for a significant noise complaint that we may be having on one of our sites. So there is that other element of the work that my team do, is around the prevention work, around ensuring that we condition developments that they don't then cause a noise problem during construction and then after the premises being occupied by either a commercial or residential element. So I think I've answered all the points from Councillor Copley. Then Councillor Porter, the budget, yes, we have got an existing budget for officers to be able to go out and do proactive out of hours inspections, and that won't impact on any of the other budgets as part of my service. So I'm quite confident that the existing budget that we do have for environmental health during the daytime can cover any of these additional inspections that need to be carried out. I hope I've covered everything in that.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. There was a lot of questions thrown at you. Thanks very much. So now we're going to move on to the amendment. So do we have a proposer who can introduce it? Councillor Payne.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to clarify, relating to the amendment which was circulated today, which asks for a further report when a further 9 months data is available, taking it so we have tables representing a whole year before us. Just to be clear, this isn't indicating that we're against this change to the out-of-hours service. We can, see the sense in this and see the arguments for making that. Particularly, it's interesting that we are the only council still maintaining this service. And we recognise, to be blunt, that it is a very significant saving in difficult times. So I can see why this is also an opportune moment to move in this direction. I think the reason we're hesitant about making it a permanent, or at least supporting making it a permanent change at this point, is that also that's a very significant cut that we're making here to a public service after what's actually a reasonably short trial, just of October to December. The reason we'd really like to see a full year's worth of information available before we support making this permanent is for two reasons. First of all, I'm conscious that October to December doesn't include the summer months, and it'd be interesting to compare how the figures for noise complaints fluctuate throughout the year, as I could imagine, and again, just anecdotally from our residents, over the summer months when people may be gathering and perhaps socialising slightly more noisily than they perhaps need to, those figures may increase. It'd be helpful to see the summer months there. And also looking at tables 1 and 2 there, much as Councillor Ashton's right, the number of reports has dropped significantly. We've also been living during a pandemic when socialising was strongly recommended against. So I'm not confident this reflects a normal time to see what the normal pattern would be. And so for that reason, we're not against this change at all, but I think to make it permanent, we'd really like to see a full year's worth of data to be able to judge clearly the impact that would have. Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Parr, did you want to say anything?
No, thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks. I think I'm going to ask the Executive Councillor, Councillor Moore, and the officer if they wanted to give their thoughts on the practicability and on the amendment.
Thank you. So I support the recommendations in the report, but I can understand the desire for looking at 12 months data. So I would ask the committee to support the recommendations, but that we could commit that rather than in a further 12 months, but that in 9 months we would look at the full year's data and bring that back to the committee. So that's not supporting the amendment, it's going ahead with the proposals, but it's still reviewing in 9 months, so this October when we've got a year's data. Also, it was mentioned earlier that the service was removed and it was to do with staff changes at the director level. That's simply not true. It is mentioned in the report that it's been very difficult to staff this service. It's been reliant on one person doing it as their main role. Obviously, that's quite a difficult job, out of hours, week in, week out, but it's been heavily reliant on our hard-working environmental health officers, as has been mentioned, in a pandemic, doing extra out of hours, and that takes them then away from their day jobs where they're actually able to be a lot more effective. So I support this change, and as we will do across the council with everything, if something's not working, we'll review it and we'll make improvements. Thank you.
Thanks. And did the officer want to say anything on the amendment?
Oops.
Did you want to say something? Sorry, go ahead. It was there was some confusion here about who was going to speak. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but I just wanted to offer.
No, thank you, Chair. I think all I would say is that we've been in this this situation of flux now for 2 to 3 years because we have been unable to recruit into posts. I was asked to do a service review for all the out-of-hours services across the council. And the one significant area was the out-of-hours noise service, which I started in 2018. We've had a reduced service, then we reduced it again in 2019, and we further reduced it in 2020. So it is a service that has reduced from time to time, primarily due to staffing. And as Councillor Moore said, we were then down to one officer having to deal with it full time, plus my environmental health officers on a voluntary basis. And the staffing situation hasn't really changed. So I think that's just something to be mindful of. but I'm happy to review the situation in October and bring another report in October.
Thanks very much. So have we got any debate on the amendment? Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on the process now, but also just a point of information. I think the Executive Councillor suggested that I had said that I thought this change was due to a change of directorship. That wasn't what I said at all. I said the reason it wasn't communicated, certainly with us on this side of the chamber, I don't know if it was with my colleagues opposite, was due to that handing over. I don't think that this is due to a change in the directorship, so just to be crystal clear on that. Can I just clarify regarding the amendment, as I was asked today, if we would be happy for it to read to review after 9 months before making it permanent, which I said I'm very happy for it to be 9 months and it makes sense to take it to a full year. If the amendment is not accepted, but we would still review it anyway, what is the process then for, if for instance it wasn't working at all, would we then look to make it unpermanent again? I'm just not quite clear how that fits with making changes if we find there is a need, if we've already voted today to make it permanent.
Councillor Moore is going to respond to that.
The reason to do it in October is so that if we do need to make any changes, then we're able to do it in line with the budget, so that we could make changes faster. But as has been said, this wasn't actually our first plan for this service. It was to recruit into it, but we've not been able to do it. So we have to bear that in mind. I'm not sure how things are going to change within the next few months, but recruitment across the council and generally in the city is quite difficult. But that's exactly the reason to do it in October, is to give ourselves the option of putting in a budget bid if we need to.
So we're going to move on to the vote unless there's any further debate on the amendment. Okay, sorry, Councillor Payne, can I just clarify? So obviously we've had the first amendment and then we've had the second one today. Is it the second one that you want to take forward, yeah?
Yes, please, Chair, I'm happy with it to be 9 months.
Yeah, okay, fine. Moving on to the vote, all those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands.
For, Chair.
All those against?
Sticks again, Chair.
Okay, so that amendment was not carried.
Correct.
Sorry, I couldn't remember if we were voting on the main one or the amendment. So now we're going to... Sorry? Yeah, so now we're moving on to vote on the main substantive report. Sorry, is there some confusion?
I'm so sorry, Chair. I think it's just a point of procedure that, so if the Executive Council has agreed that you are happy to review it within 9 months, but then the party opposite have just voted against doing that. So can I just ask for a confirmation of whether it is being reviewed in 9 months or not, because that's very conflicting.
I think from my understanding, we were already planning to do that anyway, so it wasn't needed. But maybe Councillor Moore can clarify.
We're accepting the recommendations. So we're changing the service as has been set out in the trial, but as would be normal, and we'd be doing it anyway, but I'm happy, I understand why you're calling for it, we will still review it in October. But we're actually changing the service now, but when we've got a year's data, we'll see how it's going, whether it's working, whether it's not. It is an all. These services are reviewed constantly. Officers are always looking for ways to improve services, to bring in new things like the noise app. Is that clear?
Sorry, Jane, did you want to come in? Great, so now we'll move on to a vote on the substantive recommendations in the report. So by a show of hands, those in favour?
Six, Chair.
Great. Those against? And those abstaining?
4 abstentions, Chair.
Okay, so that was carried. Can I ask the Executive Councillor if they're prepared to accept the recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, find my spot. So now we're going to move on to agenda item 12, which is the complaint upheld by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Service relating to pest control. The presenting officer for this is Yvonne O'Donnell, and there's no public speakers. So please could I ask Yvonne to introduce this item? The sound's not working, Yvonne? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So this is a report as to note of the outcome of a ombudsman inquiry around the pest control service. So following a stage 1 and 2 complaint of our pest control service, the complainant exercised their right to complain to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Service. The complaint that was put forward is outlined in paragraph 3.4 of the report. During stage 1 and 2 of the complaint process, officers identified some improvements within the service which have been made. The main complaint to the LGO was that the council were not prepared to reimburse the vet bills without a vet report. The main issue the LGO raised about the liability was about the liability, and this matter should have been referred to the council's insurers for them to investigate. So the outcome from the LGO report was that the service had to pay £100 compensation to the complainant for the time and trouble that it took, which we've done, and to forward the complainant to our insurers, which officers have already also done. Since this report was written, and just as an item of update for your information, I have been informed by our insurers that they have denied liability on behalf of the council. The complainant has appealed twice, and both times this decision has been upheld by our insurers. So the Executive Council is recommended to note the report and the findings of the report.
Thanks very much. Does anyone have any comments or discussion? Councillor Payne.
Just a quick comment, Chair. Thank you for this clear report. It sounds like a series of very unfortunate events, and I think we're very satisfied that the Council has done all it should and worked very hard to build bridges and handle this completely appropriately. So thank you to the officers for their time on what I'm sure has been not a pleasant complaint to have to handle. The only comment I wanted to make is that we're really glad to see as a result of this that signage is now going to be placed to indicate when the council are using rodenticides, and I think this exactly indicates why we're so keen to see that being brought forward, so people that are informed, are educated, and therefore can make their own safe choices. So I'm glad to see this being forward in the case of rodenticides, and therefore I do hope the Executive Council will continue to consider how we can do that quickly for herbicides as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks to Yvonne as well for joining us tonight and for all your hard work during the pandemic. I know it must have been really difficult for your team, and I think we really appreciate all the hard work. So we're now going to move on to the vote. So could I have a show of hands for those in favour of accepting the recommendations?
I think the committee has noted the report, Chair.
Oh, so we don't have to have a vote? Okay, right. Okay, so I think, do you want to say anything, Councillor Moore? No.
Just thank you to the team for all their work. Obviously, it's an unfortunate incident. I'm a dog lover myself, But I understand that the team have worked hard to resolve it, and thank you.
Thanks very much. So I think that concludes the meeting. So thanks so much to the officers here, in particular James. You've provided a lot of support to me before the meeting. Thanks so much. And also thanks to all the everyone here still wearing their masks. I know the rules have changed today, and it's really good that everyone's still wearing their masks and protecting everyone. So thank you very much.